I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. This was one of the best Disney Plus shows I've seen in a long time, and I know that's not saying much when you compare it to shows like Echo, for example, which only stood out to me during scenes where Daredevil showed up. Even Loki Season 2, which I did enjoy, still had moments that dragged, but it did end up being one of the only ones that had a decent conclusion. Daredevil Born Again kept me engaged throughout, and I had a great time with it even though it wasn't perfect. I went ahead and rewatched all 3 seasons of the Netflix show, as well as The Defenders, which I didn't watch when it released. I already watched the first seasons of Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, and I enjoyed them quite a bit. I didn't bother with Iron Fist though, it just wasn't interesting to me. And even though I was a little bit lost with some of the storylines involving him during The Defenders, it didn't take away from the main plot anyway, plus he was my least favourite in the group if I'm being honest. Oh, and of course I had to check out both seasons of The Punisher, which I really enjoyed. I know it sounds cliched at this point, but I liked the first season more than the second. And I was annoyed there wasn't going to be a third, just like M was, but still, it was a good time and most likely better than Iron Fist. I really think going into the show after watching what came before definitely helps, but I can also see why it might feel a bit jarring for many viewers. Some elements are just so different, even from the first episode. It wasn't perfect, obviously. There were moments that clearly had to be reshot, which made certain scenes feel a bit disjointed, and a few scenes relied heavily on CGI, but we'll get into that later on. For now, I'm just going to share my thoughts on the season as a whole. Daredevil Born Again picks up pretty much right after the end of the 3rd season, which wasn't a plan initially. This was actually supposed to be more of a soft reboot that didn't include key characters like Foggy or Karen, and barely any Daredevil action early on. But Marvel scrapped most of that and went back to something closer to the Netflix style, which honestly ended up being a better move than what they had, since the main cast weren't fully on board with the initial plan anyway. Foggy dying in the first episode was a big moment, definitely one that I'm sure divided fans, and in a way it kinda proved that they still didn't fully plan to bring back those characters, especially Karen, who only shows up briefly in the first and final episode. But based on how the series wrapped up, it looked like she's gonna have a more prominent role in the 2nd season. Anyway, Foggy gets killed by Bullseye, which we later find out was actually a hit ordered by Vanessa. While Kingpin was in prison, she pretty much took over everything. She started running her own money laundering setup through Red Hook, which is technically a free port because of some old charter document. Basically, it's this loophole that makes the area almost untouchable by US law. Foggy was close to exposing the whole thing, so Vanessa had him killed to keep it covered up. Matt then goes after Bullseye and they have a well-shot fight scene which looked like it was a one-shot with invisible cuts in certain moments, but overall an enjoyable scene for the first episode. Eventually, Matt ends up throwing Bullseye off the roof of the building, essentially breaking his code of not killing, which Bullseye ends up surviving, so technically... Anyway, it cuts to a year later. Matt is working under a new firm, leaving his Daredevil alter ego in the past, while Fisk eventually gets released after the charges against him fall apart. And from there, he starts working the public, talking about how he's changed, pushing this redemption angle, and even running for mayor. There's even a quiet sit down between him and Matt. They're both being civil on the surface, but you can feel the tension. After Fisk wins the election, he brings in the anti-vigilante task force. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. Cracks down on street level heroes, basically turns New York into a lockdown city under his control, and obviously this divides the city. And that's one of the core themes of the series. Not just Matt and Fisk trying to hide who they really are, but the bigger picture of power and corruption. All of it mirrors how both men try to act like they've changed, but by the end it's clear neither of them can outrun who they are. The show introduces new characters such as Muse, portrayed by Hunter Doohan. Muse is a deeply unsettling villain who views murder as a form of art, using his victims' blood to create grotesque murals across New York City. His presence puts pressure on both Fisk and Matt in different ways. It gives Fisk the excuse to tighten control over the city and justify the anti-vigilante task force. But it also drags Matt back into the fight, forcing him to realize he can't stay on the sidelines while people like Muse are out there. Another vigilante named White Tiger also makes an appearance. He's played by Camar de los Reyes, who unfortunately passed away from cancer in December 2023. White Tiger is introduced as Hector Ayala, a seasoned street-level hero. He becomes a client of Matt after facing false charges for the death of a police officer. Matt defends him in court, revealing Hector's identity as White Tiger to highlight his past heroics, ultimately leading to his acquittal. However, despite Matt's advice to step away from vigilantism for his safety, Hector resumes his role and is tragically killed shortly after. This arc underscores the dangers of the vigilante path and serves as a poignant reflection for Matt and the potential consequences of his own choices. Following Hector's death, his niece Angela Del Toro, portrayed by Camila Rodriguez, is introduced. Her character is poised to take on the mantle, setting the stage for her potential emergence as the new White Tiger in future storylines. Although I wasn't familiar with the character before this show, I think it would have been great to see a bit more of him in action, especially fighting for his community, like it was described in the courtroom scenes. I briefly talked about how the cast weren't fully on board with the initial idea of the soft reboot rather than continuing the story set up by the Netflix series, and you can definitely feel it. Elements from both versions are scattered throughout the season, and it creates this odd blend where some episodes feel like they're pulling in different directions. This is where I think the divide between fans really comes in, and honestly, it makes sense. Episodes 2 through 7 were from the original creative team, while episode 1, 8, and 9 were made after Marvel scrapped that version and brought in the new showrunner and directors. That's why some episodes hit harder than others, but I still think they did a solid job pulling it all together, considering the mess behind the scenes. And with season 2 now fully in the hands of the new team, it's definitely set up to be more consistent and hopefully stronger overall. So yeah, I'm glad Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio were able to convince Marvel to stick closer to the original. They weren't just passive about it either. They reportedly pushed back on the soft reboot direction and made it clear that they wanted to honor the tone and continuity of the Netflix series. Their input played a big part in Marvel stepping back, rethinking the whole thing, and eventually bringing in a new showrunner and directors to steer it back on track. Overall, I thought the show was captivating enough to have me excited for the second season, especially with the direction they're taking things now. I do wish there were a lot more Daredevil scenes, and even some with White Tiger could have been really good. I did mention this earlier, but seeing John Bernthal back as the Punisher was incredible, and I'm hearing there might be a Werewolf by Night style special presentation for his character, so that could be interesting. I'm glad Marvel's going crazy with the violence since Deadpool, because this show had some insane levels of violence, and seeing it be a part of Disney is always so funny to me, but I welcome it. There definitely needs to be a balance, so maybe we can get that happening a lot more in the MCU, obviously the right level of violence depending on the movie or show. And I know this might be impossible based on contractual agreements, but maybe even have Daredevil and Spider-Man team up somehow, even if just for one episode. I know I'm not alone in this, but I'm sure it's most likely going to happen in Secret Wars, but we'll have to wait and see. Let me know down below what you thought about the show and whether or not you agree with anything I said. Thanks so much for watching the video if you made it this far into it, and please like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Anyway, that's all I've got for now, so I'll catch you in a bit.